So glad to have Dave McCormick with us right now. Let's just go back to it's only been about 24 hours. It's so fresh for so many of us, but especially you. Remind people where you were when those shots rang out.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I had given a speech earlier to the group, and I was back in the back and met President Trump when he came in, and he said he was going to have me come up on the stage, and I think he had that in his mind because we went out there and started to speak. I was in the front row, off to the right, and within a minute or two, he said, "I'm gonna Dave McCormick. We want to have him as our senator," and gave an introduction and said, "Dave, come on up." And so I got up and started to walk up on the stage, and they said, "Well, why don't you come up a little bit later?" And literally within a couple minutes after that, the shooting started. And it was a pop and then several more pops. And it was, I'm a former military guy, and it became clear pretty quickly it was a gun, maybe multiple guns. And it was immediate confusion. People were relatively calm, but everybody dropped down. And the president, I looked over and was clearly hit, grabbed his ear, and then got behind the podium. And the Secret Service was on top of him almost immediately. And then he stood up, and they moved him sort of in that phalanx you saw in the video. But I saw his face and blood on his face, but then his fist come out of there, and almost in defiance and assurance, reassuring the American people, and really an incredible strength. You imagine getting shot and having the poise and
Right.
the courage to sort of stand up there. And about the same time they were shuffling him off the stage, to my back, in the bleachers, it was clear that somebody had been hit, somebody had been shot, and people were administering first aid, and there was a lot of blood. And sadly, I'm not sure if that person survived or not, but it was clearly
Right.
it looked like a very serious wound. And people were hunkered down because they didn't know whether the shooting was actually done. I didn't know. We didn't know if there was one shooter or multiple shooters. So it was a very confusing time. And I think the main takeaway is a horrific deaths and that we've had, but an inch difference and the president would be dead. It was just remarkable.
And that is why it's so important, I think, for so many to realize what happened here. You understand the military, you understand sight lines. From the outside, it seems like this location where the shooter was would have been an obvious place for someone to do something like this. What kind of questions do you have about access that that person had, and really how this came about?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that this could have happened without a massive failure somewhere. There was a massive failure in the security plan. There was something went terribly wrong that a person with a rifle, a sniper, could have gotten in with 150 yards. That's not much distance at all for a sniper, for someone with a long rifle, and could get that kind of access. So there's clearly a huge break. I didn't honestly think there was anything wrong with security when I came in. I came through a special entrance because I was speaking and I was
Sure.
wanted, and they tested me, and there was security everywhere. The Secret Service reacted immediately when the president was shot. I mean, he was covered immediately. It looked like they were quite responsive. But the fact that shooter could have been inside that perimeter is an absolute failure beyond imagination. And we really have to get to the bottom of it because it's just unthinkable.
How concerned are you for your own safety right now? You are the U.S. Senate nominee for the Republicans. You are going around, you're campaigning, and a lot of rallies just like this.
Yeah, well, the thing about this, and the reason it was so hard to digest, was there was, I don't know, 15,000 people there. And it was I'd only been to my second Trump rally, but it was kind of jubilant. And, people were USA, and it was happy. And I spoke with the president, as I said earlier, he was happy. And so it said I had such a positive energy about it. And then in a moment's time, it just turned into something horrible and violent. And I honestly didn't think about my safety really during the event at all. And when I got back to my house late last night, I had calls and texts and eventually talked to all six of my daughters, and they were terrified. It hadn't occurred to them that because I was running for public office that my safety might be at risk, and frankly, it hadn't occurred to me that much either. And so it's just a recognition that public life, running for public office, being a public official, you shouldn't have to worry about your physical safety. And we can't have an environment with political rhetoric that is encouraging violence. I'm not sure you can connect the dots directly, but it's no doubt that an environment that's dehumanizing and saying horrible things about people in public life certainly has to be a contributing factor to violence. And this isn't party specific. This is on all
Right.
sides. And I'm sadly, I suspect that that could have been the case here. Certainly, likely the case with Steve Scalise. Certainly, possibly the case. Likely the case with Paul Pelosi. So this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. It's un-American. And I think we've got to really pause and try to dial things back a bit in terms of the rhetoric that surrounds politics these days.
Last thing, politically, where do you see this going? Maybe short term or long term. We'll deal with the short term initially. We know we're in the thick of a presidential cycle. You'll be on the ballot as well. Will this be a groundswell that will eventually people rallying around the former president, and this would possibly be politically, now that we know he's okay, actually a bonus for him and take him in the right direction in the polls and beyond?
Because I've been wrong so much, I've stopped trying to be a political prognosticator of any kind. I really have no idea. I think the one thing that is clear is this will be a unifying force for Republicans. And the president, I mean, I was dumbfounded. I mean, you never know how somebody's going to respond to being shot. As a military person, like when the first bullets start flying, people react differently. And the fact that he sort of had the self-awareness, the composure, the courage to respond in the moment as he did, that couldn't, obviously you couldn't plan for that. You just don't know how you're going to react. But it was, it was remarkable.
Yep.
And I think those images are iconic. And I think how he conducted himself in that moment of crisis, I think will be a defining feature of the race, not because anybody planned it that way, but just because in a moment of crisis, he responded that way. And so I think that will be a big deal. How it plays out politically, I'm not entirely sure.
And like you said before, within an inch, and we're having an entirely different conversation. And that's
Trap.
why we really need to find out how this happened, because we can't be confused by the results and take a deep breath that it almost happened, because it very well could have, given the scenario.
That's right. And, we can't forget that others weren't so lucky.
Yep.
And so, what a horrific thing. You've got, people going to these rallies peacefully, supporting their person that they want to support politically. And all of a sudden, their life is at risk. That's unthinkable, unacceptable, un-American. And we got to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, thank you for your time. We're so glad that you're okay as well. We will keep in mind the people that are not okay, that got injured and were killed in this scenario. But we're happy you're good, and we hope to see you on the campaign trail around Central PA pretty soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.